everybody. Welcome to In the Beginning, a Bible story for the girlies with me, Avela Fongoka. And guys, this is just a podcast where we talk about the different stories in the Bible in hopes of motivating each other to get into the Word for ourselves. Oh my days. Okay, I'm so excited I'm so happy to be back, guys. I missed interacting with you guys. I missed talking about the Bible. Okay, I was fighting for my life though. Maybe that sounds a little bit dramatic, but I know that technically we don't do seasons, but this feels like a season 2 for some reason, even though we've technically covered like 4 books in the Bible already, but this feels like season 2. And I don't have anything new except I am borrowing one of my friend's microphones. This is not an ad, by the way. I have nothing new except this microphone, which is actually really funny because look at what it can do, guys. Hey, everybody. So I'm excited to see what comes from that development on this podcast. I'm actually really excited to talk about today's story. We are actually in the underdog of books. And before we start, I considered wearing black today because this is a farewell, okay? Not mine. Sorry. Let me rephrase. This is not my farewell. Okay, prepare to be sick of me, guys. I'm actually so sorry. But remember I was telling you guys, like at that specific point that we were at in the story, we were getting ready to say bye to Moses. And we've actually been in a really weird space with Moses because we know he's about to die, but he's not dead. To be honest, it's very real that we live in that space because that's also maybe the space that the Israelites were living in because at this point, like where they're at in the story right now, they're about to cross the Jordan River. Joshua, who's Moses' the next guy, he's already been commissioned. We already know Joshua's going to be our next leader. And now here comes Moses at his 120 years old, still kicking, still healthy, by the way. So they were also just a little confused, because you aren't going to see the promised land, Moses, and we're pretty sure our next step is to go into the promised land, Moses. So, not to be rude or ungrateful, but like, what are you doing here? Okay. And from that space, we get, honestly, I don't think I'm alone when I say maybe one of the most important books in the Bible, in my opinion. One of the most important books in the Bible. We get the book of Deuteronomy. Okay. And now before you turn this video off, don't turn this video off. Okay. I'm not alone in liking Deuteronomy. Okay. Jesus, when he's in the wilderness, okay, and he responds to Satan 3 times, all 3 times that he chooses to respond to Satan, he quotes Deuteronomy all 3 times. Now, I don't know about you, but if Deuteronomy is good enough for Jesus, then it's good enough for me. Okay? So Deuteronomy is actually it's a slept on book. And I'm determined in today's episode where we are going to honor Moses and the work that he has done. I am determined to help us see it in a different lens, okay? Because there's actually a lot going on in Deuteronomy. And actually, I'm not going to lie to you, the past couple weeks, Deuteronomy has actually really carried me like this, okay? Because we'll get into a little bit of what's been going on in life, but I just need you to know that Deuteronomy is not a game. There was someone, and I know she might have been saying it as a joke and she probably meant well, but people believe this. I made a joke on a TikTok where I was like, oh guys, if you don't get a letter for Valentine's Day this year, don't worry because Paul left you 13 letters, right? Obviously I was just joking. Like, I do hope somebody gives you guys a letter for Valentine's Day. But someone in the comments was like, am I a Corinthian? Which is funny. Like, I get the joke in that. But people really do have that attitude, especially when it comes to the book of Deuteronomy. But if that's your thinking, like, oh, I'm not going to read Corinthians because I'm not a Corinthian, well, then let's just chuck the baby out the bathwater then. Okay? Let's forget about Adam and Eve too. Who are they? Don't know. Doesn't concern me. Why? Let's do the whole thing proper. In that case, like if that's the thinking, also, just so you guys know, another recent development in my life, I just learned the term throw the baby out the bathwater. And there's something you should really know about me. I love a good English saying. I love it. When I was young and the first time I heard someone, I think, and toss the baby out of the bathwater is maybe the best one that I've heard. Second to that is like, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. That's a good one. I love a good English saying. I had this uncle when I was growing up who literally didn't even really speak English that well, mind you. Okay. I was like 9 years old. I remember where I was when I heard him say this. And they were all arguing about who knows what. I don't know. They used to argue a lot back then. But they were all arguing. And he was speaking in Xhosa the whole time and broke it to say one phrase in English. Ne? He was like talking. And then he goes, but at this particular juncture, guys. And I remember going, at this particular juncture, what a great way to say at this point. Because not just at this one, at this particular one. This particular, not just point, juncture. There are options here. We have a problem. There is tension in this situation. At this particular juncture, I was nine, okay? My point is, I've always loved English sayings. And these days, I'm spending every single opportunity that I get to find a way to say, well, then let's just toss the baby out the bathwater. Because really, it's just a brilliant saying. My point is, if you, for some reason, believe that you don't need to read the book of Deuteronomy because you are not the Israelites that it was written to, well, then let's toss the baby out the bathwater and forget the whole thing. Just stop the podcast. Matter of fact, forget everything we've ever spoken about and just don't even worry about it. At that point, let's toss the baby out the bathwater, okay? Like, let's not though. The whole point of the saying though is that you shouldn't. I actually, I'm not even sure I know what the point of the saying is, but you shouldn't toss the baby out the bathwater is what I'm actually trying to say. My actual point is that even the way the book of Deuteronomy is written, Moses is talking to the generation that wasn't there. They're actually like us. They weren't there when everybody was slaves in Egypt. They weren't there when it was time to cross the Red Sea. They weren't there. And yet Moses is talking in this speech and he's going to say a whole bunch of you guys did this. You guys did this. Do you remember when God did this for us and he did this for us? And these guys have to listen knowing that actually none of us were there except him. Just him and Joshua, really. And Caleb. Shout out Caleb. That's one of the tensions that are held in Deuteronomy that we actually share with the recipients of Deuteronomy. Neither of us were there. And yet Moses chooses to say, you. Why? Because if you're going to get grafted into this promise of God, then you better graft the whole thing. Graft the whole thing, girl. Their mess up was our mess up. Why? Because if we don't learn it, we'll do it again anyway. So, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself. What is this speech? What is Deuteronomy? So they're getting ready to go into the promised land. But Moses isn't going. He's not going to go. This is his farewell speech. This is I don't know if you guys watch, some of you maybe watch musicals. I love musicals. This is his 11 o'clock number. This is the moment in the musical when the hero of the story actually realizes that the thing they always wanted is the thing that they're not going to get. And then they belt out this heartbreaking song that makes the audience stand up and go, get that girl a Tony. That's what this is, okay? It's his 11 o'clock number. If you guys watch musicals, it's like in Gypsy when Rose starts singing all that work and what did it get me? Why did I do it? It's The Color Purple when Celie sings, I don't need you to love me. That's what this speech is. This is Moses's. Guys, if it was his last breath, this is that thing he says when you're holding their hand and he's like, tell my mom I love her. That's what the speech is. It's the last thing we're going to hear from this man. And so for us to then sit after 4 books and go, Deuteronomy doesn't really matter though. Mind you, Jesus verbally fights Satan with this book, but it doesn't matter though. Let's just chuck the baby out the bathwater. Okay, I'm done. I'm not going to say that again. I'm done, I promise. My point is, Deuteronomy is a good book. So I think I've spent enough time convincing you guys that it's a book that's worth our attention, right? I'm going to tell you what I've been doing. Because at first, if I'm being honest, I wasn't actually going to do Deuteronomy because I was like, I just felt like there are more educated people who should teach this book. And I I still think that, like, I do actually hope that there's someone else who can teach you Deuteronomy, but I do just want to motivate you to read it. And I'm gonna tell you something else. If this is your vibe, what I've been doing is I literally, on the Bible app, this is not a paid promo, okay, it's just what I do. On the Bible app, you can have the option to like press play and a voice will like read it back to you. So I've been doing that on the Bible app. Why? Because Moses said this as a speech. So I want to hear this as a speech. And honestly, it just felt more enjoyable to me to be able to like listen to it as a speech. I'm talking, girl, I'm washing dishes and I'm listening to the speech. I'm cleaning my room, listening to the speech. I'm on my way to work, listening to the speech. It's only really like maybe 2 to 3 hours. Okay, I know how that sounds, but like it's really only 2 to 3 hours. And it's also interesting because again, we're in the same boat as these guys, except maybe we're actually getting a little more context about what we already know. These Israelites weren't there. And so Moses in this speech is doing a lot of, like the first 3 chapters for sure, but also he continues to do it. He's retelling them the story of like, he took us out of Egypt and then he did this and then he did this and then we did this. Because they need to know God's past faithfulness to their ancestors, to trust them into their tomorrow. Do you get what I mean? And he keeps emphasizing it, like, remember your God. Tell your children. There's something Moses knows about the importance of continuing to tell people about God's past faithfulness, right? And the weird thing was, for a really long time, especially when I first started reading Deuteronomy, I used to skip that first part because I was like, we just read that. Why is Moses giving us a summary of the last 4 books that we just read? A side note that I will say really quick is that it's really funny that while we were like reading about Moses' disobedience, we obviously speculate a lot and we're like, maybe this is what he's thinking, maybe this is what like we were doing a bit of like speculation while as we spoke about the story. And it's funny that Moses is retelling the story about when he hits the rock instead of speaking to it, right? And the reason he's not going into the promised land. And I was like, man, is Moses like a little bitter? Like, because there's moments in Deuteronomy where he was like, I'm like, not verbatim, but there were moments where he was like, I'm not going to the promised land because of you guys. And mind you, I was like laying in bed and just listening. And he was like, because of you guys. And I woke up. I said, because of who? Who's he talking about? Because I remember that story. Okay. I know I wasn't there, but I remember reading it in Moses' own words. No. And I think that one was all on you, big guy. I don't know. Like, now they were there, okay, because they were the new generation that he lashes out on, and we spoke about the tension. It's just a really interesting read because it's like you finally also get to see some thoughts maybe that Moses is having as these stories are playing out. Let me continue with the story. So what I was actually trying to say is it's interesting to me that in the beginning when I first started reading Deuteronomy, I thought that I didn't need to actually read the parts where he was retelling about the books that we've read because I was like, he's just summarizing, I remember those stories. And so I would skip it and I'd start in like chapter 4. And the interesting thing is, I actually think Moses intentionally retells stories of God's past faithfulness because he knows that you guys are about to take a step of obedience right now. You are about to step into something. You are about to go into battle right now. And when you get there, you might not see what you think you are going to see. This step of obedience might not look like what you think it's gonna look like. You might not know where God is. You might be discouraged. Things might start shaking, okay? He's not going to be there. He doesn't know what's about to happen. But he does know one thing. You can rely on the character of God. And this is who he has been for us. So remember your God and remember to tell your kids, no matter what happens on the other side of this river, I need you to remember who God has been to the Israelites. He's trying to make sure that before these guys step into the promised land, they have some type of spiritual infrastructure that will hold them up when they get there. Now follow me. I told you, I skipped it. I skipped chapter 1 to 3 because I was like, I know the summary. I don't need this part. And I'll tell you something really interesting. As I was reading the way that I initially read it, stay with me. Stay with me on this topic. There were some things that Moses was saying where I was kind of sitting and I was like, man, I actually kind of see where the Pharisees were coming from now. Like while I was reading, now don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I agree with them. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying I see where they were coming from. And it was around, there's this one chapter, I'll put it up on the screen because I'm forgetting which one it is. It was around the chapter where they're talking about like if somebody's mocking God or like lies on God, you are to put them to death. And I was listening to that and I was like, man. And to be honest, I'm not that shocked that I got to that conclusion. You know, when you watch a movie sometimes and there's a villain who you're like, man, this person is actually really crazy and like really evil. And then they make a sequel, and for some reason that sequel is like the life of that villain when they were a kid, and you go, oh, like that's why they are the way that they are. For example, think about X-Men. I don't know if you guys care or know who. Basically, the gist of X-Men is that there's people who have superpowers and then there's people who don't have superpowers. And Magneto has superpowers and wants to kill all the people who don't have superpowers. And at first you're like, man, this guy's kind of crazy. This is just really evil. What is wrong with him? And then you get to the next movie, or like maybe the next movie. I don't know. And you find out that Magneto was a child during the Holocaust. He's Jewish and he lived during the Holocaust. And they found out, the Nazis that were holding him found out that he had superpowers. And obviously they want to use him as like a weapon in this war. And so they're trying to get him to like learn how to use his superpowers and like use them. And so they kind of dangle his mother in front of him and say, hey, like if you don't move this coin, we're going to kill your mom. And they do. They end up killing his mom because he was a child and he didn't know how to control the superpower. But my point is, do I agree with Magneto? No. But then you watch that movie and you go, oh, that's why though. Like, like it's not good, but that's why he did it. Do you get what I mean? And that's kind of how I felt like reading Deuteronomy. I was like, oh, like these guys weren't initially crazy. Like they weren't crazy. And also, let me go ahead and take this time to clear one thing up. They as a whole weren't crazy. For anyone who's just confused, the Pharisees are the people who live. When we get to the New Testament, they are the religious leaders at the time. And the reality is that the Pharisees, it's a thing that lives way longer, way before and also way after Jesus' ministry on the earth, as in like the 3-year period that we get to read about in the New Testament. The problem is, in that 3-year period where we really get to read about the Pharisees, we had some bad nuts in the batch. You feel me? And then that taints the overall. Like, I think as Christians, we have kind of like gotten to this place where we'll say like, oh, you're being a Pharisee. And that's actually kind of crazy to say because it's not true. Like what you want to say is that person's being legalistic. Cool. I got you there. But if you're trying to say someone's being a Pharisee, it's also just not true because that involves too much studying for that person to be what you are saying that they're being. The Pharisees actually exist because at the time that Jesus shows up, what's happened is God has been silent for about 400 years? He's been silent for about 400 years. The Israelites, this is in the second Roman rule at this point. So way later than when Deuteronomy is being written, okay? And the Israelites have reactions, okay? And different worldviews about what they're supposed to do now in the world that they live with. There hasn't been a prophet who's come. They haven't seen the Messiah yet. Like, they really feel like God has been silent for the last 400 years, right? And so we get people like the Zealots who believe in like a violent revolutionary overthrow that's going to happen in the future. Really, they want obedience to Torah, but they have a violent approach about it. We know this. We have the Essenes, the guys who kind of go out into the wilderness to prepare the way for the Lord and also want nothing to do with the corruption that's taking place. We have the Sadducees, who were the corruption that was taking place. We have Herodians, who would have been the people who they were believers, but they were also accepting a little bit of the Roman life that was being introduced to them. We have, just like your everyday Jewish people. And so the Pharisees exist as a part of one of those groups as well. And they were the people who believed that obedience to the Torah, complete obedience to the Torah, was going to move God. That he would send the Messiah, or he would send a prophet, or he would talk, because they haven't heard from him in 400 years. And so they want everybody to obey Torah because they believe that that's what's going to move God. Now on paper, that doesn't actually sound like a bad worldview to have, because Yahweh also wants them to obey Torah. Now, we know now that you can't really manipulate God into moving or doing something, and that sometimes even the silence isn't necessarily like a bad thing. But these poor guys, okay, this was their desperate act to be like, God has not spoken, so we need to obey Torah. And then the Pharisees exist. And they're actually pretty monumental in Judaism, like in preserving Judaism as a whole. They were pretty instrumental. They, as a whole, were not a bad group of people. They didn't even start bad. But by the time we meet them in the New Testament, they get a bit of a bad rap. We've spoken about this too. What they get a bad rap for is for missing the heart of God. And how does somebody miss the heart of God? Doing exactly what I was doing. Skipping over the recounting of what happened in the past, aka skipping over the account of God's faithfulness. I'm purely just listening to the laws, just the legal part. I genuinely, for a long time, actually looked at Deuteronomy like a legal document, which in a way it is. But I think that's exactly what got the Pharisees in hot water to begin with. Can I tell you something? Even the villains need to be humanized, lest we repeat their mistakes for thinking that we were above making it, right? And especially for me, I've told you guys before that I struggle with the hard part, as in like the feelings part of things, the vulnerability part of things. And so I've always been sensitive to whatever the Lord can teach me about the Pharisees specifically. And the fact that they're coming up again while reading Deuteronomy wasn't that bad. And actually now I have a new theology surrounding them. And it's that I actually think when Jesus shows up, I think because they didn't actually adopt the infrastructure, for example, that Moses was trying to give the Israelites right before they go into the promised land, right? They had a different infrastructure, which was based around law, that obedience to Torah was going to bring back the Messiah, okay? And now here comes this guy who, first, he's doing stuff that is legally wrong, okay? He's healing on the Sabbath. He's touching unclean things of people. Like, he's hanging out with sinners. And then he's going to tell us that he has the authority of God. And so from a legal approach, you can understand why they were actually beefing with Jesus. On a legal point, here's the thing. I don't actually think the problem they were having with Jesus was the idea of he's breaking the laws and he's this and this and this. And so this is how we need to handle him according to the law. I actually think the problem that the Pharisees had with Jesus was the wrestle of what if he's right? Do you get what I mean? Because he was doing miracles. There's no denying that what Jesus was doing was new and impressive. There's no denying that, not even for his haters. I think the genuine wrestle that these guys had was, what if he is telling the truth? What if he's not lying? What if he is everything that he says he actually is? Because if he is all of that, then actually the infrastructure that we've built crumbles. Everything that we've built our life around collapses. I think that's the actual tension that's happening with the Pharisees, more than it's about them wanting to be against Jesus. I think those guys were having a crisis of faith. Like, if he's right, then what have we been doing this whole time? What is my life? I thought a crisis of faith meant that you don't believe in God. When in reality, a crisis of faith is just more, you doubt God's goodness, you doubt his faithfulness. You're wrestling with your suffering or like your unanswered prayers, or you're wrestling with disappointment. There's so many differing versions of what a crisis of faith looks like. And I want you guys to listen with ears to hear. God had been silent for hundreds of years, okay? And they're coming from a place where he was constantly kind of talking to them, like prophets coming all out. There were kings coming out. God had been in constant communication with these guys in one way or another. Now they're going through things with Rome, and they're under attack, and they're this and this, and there's just a whole bunch of things happening, and these guys are desperate for God to say something. You have to believe that even in a world where you feel so you're so desperate for this person to say something, you have to believe that there was at least love where it started, that they did love God. But something that I'm learning, I was really struggling with God because I felt like he had told me to take a step of obedience about something, and I did. And the minute I took it, I kind of felt like he didn't say anything after that. Where like you kind of think when God says like, hey, go do this thing, you kind of think after that he would be the loudest he's ever been, because I'm out here and I don't really know what I'm supposed to do. And so I was getting really disheartened, and I was really struggling with like whether or not I even heard him say that in the first place. I was struggling with why am I taking the step of obedience and I can't feel you? I was just struggling with a whole bunch of things. And so because I couldn't hear God, I then started using theology that I know to be like, what can I do? Okay. And the theology the first thing I could think of was seek first the kingdom and it'll all be added onto you. Right. So I'm like, all right, so I'm going. Okay. And we've spoke about how I've done this before. I'm like, okay, I'm going to serve and worship. I'm going to do the podcast. I'm going to I'm going to evangelize. I'm going to do charity. I'm going to tell the good news. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. And I was watching like 5 sermons a day. When I tell you, I was like, okay, I'm going to pump myself full of spiritual knowledge and like so make all my activities about the kingdom, and surely God's going to have to move because these are all things that concern him, right? And Jenny one day came to me, and she had tried to tell me this before, but I was also so overwhelmed with the hardships of life and just everything and the things that I chose to be busy with that I didn't even hear her. And I was like, I don't have time for this. And I didn't listen. And the one day she came to me, she was like, girl, like, I'm being so for real with you. I genuinely think God is telling me to tell you, stop. And I was like, stop? That was all she said, mind you. Like, there was no specific, like, stop doing this, stop doing this, stop doing this. She was like, she just heard stop. Because if you don't stop, you won't hear God. She was like, God is talking to you. You can't hear him though, because you are pumping yourself full of this sermon, and you keep reading all these different stories in the Bible, and you're going to worship, and you're doing all of this, and God is talking to you, but you are so busy that you can't hear him. Now, let me tell you something. Genuinely, it feels like a movie now when I think about it, but I was having 2 conversations in my mind at that point in time. And the first, my knee-jerk reaction, I was so offended by just not even her saying stop. I was offended by her saying that I'm not hearing God, right? Even though I just said that to you, you and me know that my struggle was that I wasn't hearing him, and I was panicked because of that. I was panicked, and that's why I started doing all these different things, because I was like, he has to talk. If I put my foot in every one of these baskets has to give me something, right? I just said that, but I was offended that she said it for some reason. So let's start, when you retell stories, it's easy to pinpoint the problem, okay? But in the moment, I was offended that she would say, I can't hear God. And all these offensive things start coming up in my mind. And when I tell you, the quietest voice said, but when has Jenny ever tried to hurt you? And I said, okay. I started thinking, and she's still, she watches the podcast. She can tell you too that at some point in the conversation, I genuinely had just shut down. Like, as in, like, I wasn't engaged in the conversation at all. I didn't even say anything back to her. I genuinely was having the most internal battle in myself, where there was this one side that was incredibly offended at what she was saying. And then there was this other side that was like, but when has she ever hurt you? So I was like, let me hear this voice out. This side of me that's saying, when has she ever hurt me? I'm going back and forth. This is a conversation all in my head, by the way. So I said, okay, let me hear this voice out. When has Jenny ever tried to hurt me? Since the day I actually met Jenny, Jenny has been a good friend to me. And even before she was saved, she was good at giving advice. She's always been a person who gives advice that she would want to hear if she was in that position, right? Now, that's not to say that she's always right, but she is always trying to do right by you. Do you get what I mean? She's always trying to have done the right thing according to what, like, she has at her disposal. And so I started thinking about that. And then I realized, okay, so this is offense and pride talking on this end. Okay, cool. What do? I then had 2 options. Listen to her or don't. We kind of ended the conversation like right after she said that, and I didn't even respond to her because I knew that I needed to take this up with God. Like, she's done her part. She's told me what she needed to say. I now need to process this with God. The very fact that we've been able to now pinpoint that there's offense in my heart from what she said and there's pride, I know I'm under attack right now. at the very least. And so I don't need to respond. I am going to take this to God, and I have no decision. I had no decision in my mind. I came to bed, and as I was praying about it, I was like, and you know what? I am going to stop. And like I said, she wasn't specific. She didn't say stop what. So I say I'm stop all of it. I will stop all of it, okay? Because my thinking genuinely was, one, if I've already identified that I was offended as a result of pride, I know that that's not what God is using to communicate with me, right? So why would I take the option that pride was for? If the option that the pride was for was, no, don't stop, then like if 1 + 1 is 2 and 2 + 2 is 4, then why did Peter Piper pick a pickle peppers? You know what I mean? And this is what I landed on. I would rather heed the warning Jenny gave me. I would rather heed her warning and be wrong than listen to my first initial knee-jerk reaction and be wrong. In the event the first initial thought that I had was wrong, I felt like spiritually the consequences and the seriousness of that, because God hates pride, would have been more serious. I would rather stop for fear of the Lord, okay? Because if I continue and God's not backing me in my continuing, that sounds like hell. And I would rather stop and not know what to do than continue and have God against me. No chance of that. And so I genuinely was like, when I tell you I stopped. And because I didn't know what to stop specifically, and my problem is also this over information thing that I do, I stopped everything. I wasn't even listening to a sermon. I told myself, stop everything. I texted my worship leader. I said, I'm not going to serve in Feb, just so you know. I was like, I didn't even post about not doing the podcast. I stopped everything because the only thing that I genuinely knew in that moment, at this particular juncture, the only thing that I know is that Jenny has never been a bad friend to me. That's the only thing that I can genuinely say that I do know, is that in my history of my friendship with Jenny, she has never ever intentionally led me astray. And and another thing about her and her work with God, she doesn't play about God. And so she would never come to me and say, I think God said this, if God didn't say nothing. She doesn't play like that with Jesus, and she doesn't play like that with our friendship. And so because that was the only, I was in a space where I knew nothing. I was so confused about everything and so desperate about everything that the only thing I could trust was the person that I do know. And that is the space that Moses is trying to get these people to understand. And that's also the thing that the Pharisees miss. He's trying to get them to understand that there are going to be points where you aren't going to know what God is up to, if he's even up to something, if he's going to fix this, if you heard the prayer. And when that happens, you need to, at the very least, know your God. And when he says, remember God, remember your God, I always thought he's talking about, when people win a Grammy and they get up on stage and they go, shout out to God. That's what I thought he meant by remember your God. Like when you get your success, don't forget that, God was the God who got you there. But I actually think he's genuinely telling these guys, remember him. Remember his character. Remember what he has done. Because that's what's going to sustain you when you get to the parts that make no sense. No sense. And they will come. And then we get the Pharisees, who then deal with this 400-year silence. And instead of remembering their God, they lean on their own understanding. And that's exactly what I did in that moment where I thought I was doing the right thing by do this and do this and do that. And I was just so desperate for God. Like I just needed him in that space that I was in. And God was like, if you would just sit still. Because then I did. And when I did, it felt like everything just kind of moved itself out the way. Like there was even this joke that Jenny and I were constantly talking about where we were like, dude, like things got so hard at some point that we were joking about I just want to give up. Like we just kept saying that, man, I just want to give up. And I think that maybe the term itself shouldn't have been give up. I think our spirit was trying to tell us let this go. Let it go. Because what you're doing is trying to take control of everything in your life and hoping that in that way you can then manipulate God's hand to then like show up. Even though God is saying no, like there's this book. It's one of the minor prophets. It's not spoken about a lot. It's only 3 chapters if you want to go read it. It's called Habakkuk, however you want to say it. And it's a great read. But the gist of the book is that there's this prophet who's living during this time when the Israelites are being very disobedient and idolatrous and just, man, a problem. And he's complaining to God to be like, God, you know, I've been praying for these guys and we've had like legal reform in terms of like politically, there's a king who's trying to get us back to you and he's put all these things in, like he's implemented all these things, but your people are still not turning back. And he feels like God's not talking and he's not stepping in. And it's like, look at all your people. And he's grieved. This prophet is grieved. He's looking at God's people and he's like, are you seeing what's going on? And God eventually responds to him. He's not even upset at the fact that Habakkuk is having this wrestle of like, God, are you even seeing this? Are you hearing the prayers? Do you care? Like he's having a crisis of faith in one way or another, right? And God responds to him by just reminding him of past encounters. And not only that, God tells him, actually, I do have a plan, and this is what I'm going to do. And essentially, God says he's going to raise up the Babylonians to then punish the Israelites for their wickedness. And when we get to the story, you'll learn that the Babylonians are actually more wicked than the Israelites. So then Habakkuk is like, what are you talking about? So you're going to use people more wicked than us? You're going to use them to punish us? And he's like, that don't make no sense. God, that makes no sense. And God hears him, but continually just keeps anchoring him in memory of God's past faithfulness. Why? To say, even though you don't see what I'm doing and you don't understand what I'm doing, trust that I've always been faithful to you. And so in some way, this is going to have to be faithful. And it actually ends on he's like, even though the fig tree doesn't bud, like Habakkuk is basically trying to say like, even though this sucks, he then settles in the fact that, you know what? I know about God's character. And so even though I don't know what in the world is going on, what he's up to, why, I know God's character. And so like that's the thing that Moses is trying to prevent by internally building up this structure within them. It's possible that in a couple months, I'll reread the same things that I've been reading right now and be like, oh, maybe this is what the Pharisees were dealing with. But I do 100% think that Jesus challenges their faith. I think the battle that I was having when Jenny was telling me what she was telling me, I think they had that battle. I think they had this like genuine internal thing that's like, well, if he's right, then everything I've ever believed or done was wrong, you know, to be in a dramatic sense. I mean, that's how it sounds. Truly in the moment, that's how dramatic things sound. But I think it's not just about them wanting to uphold Torah so bad that Jesus shows up and then it's like, oh, you know, kill him because he's against the law. I think sometimes people also look at the way that Jesus interacts with the Pharisees and we look at it with the lens of these guys as the antagonists in the story. When in reality, Jesus was kind of clocking everybody, like all the time. There's moments where he's talking to Peter and he's like, oh, you have little faith. Or he's talking to the disciples and he's like, y'all have no faith. Or like a random stranger will show up and he'll turn to them and be like, truly, she has more faith than any of you. Like he was clocking people all the time. I actually think these moments where you wrestle and you struggle with God are almost like necessary for the building and the strengthening of your faith. It's a moment for you to stretch where you actually are with God. It's a moment for you to almost like take stock of like what's going on in your heart. What do I know about God? What have I been letting myself believe about God that maybe isn't true? A moment to like stop with God and be like, God, search my heart, create a clean heart and renew a right spirit within me. It's a moment, that I actually think God intends to have with you. We're not supposed to throw the baby out the bathwater. It's this moment where you're supposed to have a new revelation of God or like a fresh understanding of him. I think I'm starting to get to this place where like even in my walk, I'm starting to really appreciate the moments that create tension like internally, because sometimes the reward from like walking through that with God, my God. Anyway, R.I.P. Moses. I just pray that like even in those moments, as weak as you may feel or as tired as you may feel, don't in those moments then choose to rewrite who God has already proven himself to be. I think there's something very beautiful about being surrendered enough to just trust in who God has already been. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you something. Life has actually been so much better these past couple days. And it's not because anything has really changed. Like, as in, like, the circumstances that were like literally depressing me before haven't changed. But I just have this peace about it that, like, God's got it. I've been saying the actual Lord's Prayer. We'll say it at the end. That'll be our prayer today, is the Lord's Prayer. Because I've actually been saying the Lord's Prayer, and there's this one line in it that'll say, give us today our daily bread, right? And that idea is like, give us what the needs for today. Help us with today. And I've been really enjoying that line because it's just this idea of like, I'm stressing and depressing myself into a hole, thinking about things that aren't even going to happen for maybe the next 6 months, maybe even 3 years, some of them. Stressed. And I've been really enjoying the give us today our daily bread because, to be honest, since I stopped, obviously, as I stopped, God then continually revealed to me what specifically we need to stop, right? But I didn't really know what to pray for because I just felt so like, well, I was going this way and you said that's the wrong way. So now I don't know what I'm supposed to be praying. So I started praying the Lord's Prayer, and amen. Because let me tell you what I realized. The day that I actually just let it go and I said, you know what, God, you deal with it. You deal with it. Because I don't know anything, right? He did. That was the real gag. Like, I would wake up and be like, hey, God, this is a thing that's happening today. And then that thing would be sorted. It would be that day. I would go to bed and say, hey, God, this is a thing that's going to be happening tomorrow. And I need help. And then I'd wake up into tomorrow. And then that problem actually went away. Like when Jesus talks about don't worry about tomorrow because tomorrow's going to worry about itself. He ain't never told a lie. He did not tell a lie. So I've been really enjoying that part of the Lord's Prayer that's like, give us today our daily bread, because we just need to think about today. And that's when I tell you that's how I've been waking up. That's part of the surrender. Don't ask me anything about the next 5 days because I don't know. All I know is what God has just told me to do, as in today for today. That's all I know. And it's great. I have been again, I have the same problems that I had, but I'm not stressed about them because I'm living in this world where I feel like God is doing it. Anyway, mama say, mama sama makusa. Like, what can I say? There's really nothing that I care about more than knowing that what I'm doing is pleasing the Lord, right? And so for me, I just genuinely was like, have it all, dude. Like, have it all. If you don't want me to do it, then I won't. Like, I'm not the person who's gonna fight to work. I don't want to do it. But it's almost like the minute I let go of the control, that's when he was like, great. Now, let me tell you something. Okay? The old church saying, let go and let God. Let go and let God. Like, just genuinely it feels like the only piece of advice that I actually could give you. Remember who God has been. Remember God's character. Okay? Remember his character. And trust that is not gonna change. That doesn't change. Let's say the Lord's Prayer, because for some reason, the version of the Lord's Prayer that I have memorized is the KJV, like the NKJV, because I grew up in a school that used to make us say it, and I guess they just had us like say the KJV or like maybe the NKJV. So, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Okay, so hallowed means holy. Okay. Our Father who art in heaven, holy be your name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Sin. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For yours is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. When I tell you, I know, obviously, because Jesus said that's how we're supposed to pray. It's like, why don't we pray like that anymore? Because I think that prayer fixed my whole life. Like, I actually think when I started, because I didn't know what to pray, because I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing, I was like, I'm just going to pray what's in the Bible. You see how easy some of these solutions feel sometimes? It's like, why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I just think to pray what's already in the Bible? Do you get what I mean? And this is why I keep trying to tell people, like, I feel like I'm smart until it comes to my own life. Then I don't know what's going on and I don't know what to do. I don't even know if I made any sense in this whole video. I pray you're all well, first of all. And I pray that you guys are taking it seriously to remember your God. Anyway, point is, Moses, you were a real one, Moses. And like, truly rest in peace. Okay, I'm going to tell a joke and then we're going to get out of here. But you have to promise that you're going to actually, like, you have to participate. You actually have to participate, okay? Because I'm going to tell you a knock-knock joke. It's not the one that you've heard before. I'm going to tell you a knock-knock joke and you have to participate. So how knock-knock jokes work is like, I'm like, knock-knock, and you say, who's there? And then I tell you who, and you say, that person, who? And then I tell you what the joke is. Do you know what I mean? Okay, so you have to participate. Okay, so knock-knock, interrupting chicken.